Oliver was 17 years old when the sky turned red. He sat in the communication center of Meridian 7, watching the screens fill with reports of destruction. The Xylothian swarm was coming. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time. The colony had been bracing for this moment for months, but nobody was truly ready. The Xylothian Empire had already conquered most of the galaxy. They were a hive mind species controlled by their queen. Every soldier, every drone, every creature in their army shared one consciousness. They moved as one organism, thought as one mind, and destroyed everything in their path. For 300 years humanity had fought them. For 300 years humanity had been losing. Oliver's hands shook as he typed commands into the communication system. His job was to monitor incoming signals and relay information to the colony's leadership. Today those signals told a story of doom. The Xylothian fleet had jumped through a hyperspace gate just beyond the outer planets. They would reach Meridian 7 in less than 12 hours. The colony had a population of 50,000 people. They lived in underground cities, grown deep into the rocky planet's crust. The surface was barren and harsh, but beneath it was a network of tunnels and habitats where humans had built a new home. Oliver had lived here his entire life. He had never seen Earth, the world his great-great-grandparents had come from. Meridian 7 was his home. And now it was going to die. His communication terminal beeped. A priority message was coming through from the research sector. Oliver's parents worked there. His mother was named Catherine, and his father was Henry. They were both xenobiologists. Their job was to study the Xylothian creatures, to understand their biology and their weaknesses. Oliver loved them more than anything in the world. The message appeared on his screen. It was coded, hidden inside what looked like a routine technical report. Only Oliver would know to look for it. His parents had taught him this code when he was young, telling him it was a secret game they played together. Now, at 17 he understood it was no game at all. Oliver read the hidden message slowly. His heart began to beat faster with each word. His parents had discovered something. Something important. Something that could change everything. They had found a weakness in the Xylothian queen's mind. The queen controlled her entire species through quantum crystals, tiny devices that connected every Xylothian to her consciousness. These crystals were anchored in the queen's brain, linked through a network that spanned light years. But there was a problem with the network. It was old. Very old. The queen had been ruling for thousands of years, and the constant flow of consciousness through billions of connections was wearing her out. The quantum links were beginning to show signs of strain and damage. And his parents had found something else too. They had developed a compound, something they had been working on in secret, that might be able to disrupt these links. But they needed someone to deliver it. The message ended with words that made Oliver's breath catch in his throat. His parents were saying goodbye. They were not expecting to survive the invasion. The Xylothian forces were too powerful. The colony's defenses would fall. But they were sending Oliver the compound in a small vial. They were telling him to take it and run. Oliver looked around the communication center. There were 5 other people working with him. They were all scared. The older workers were trying to stay calm, to keep doing their jobs even though they knew the end was coming. The younger ones were talking about evacuation ships, about places they might escape to. But there were no evacuation ships. The colony's leaders had made that clear. They had one chance to survive. They had to defend their home. A loud alarm suddenly sounded through the entire facility. Red emergency lights began to flash on every wall. A voice came through the speakers, calm and professional but filled with terrible finality. The Xylothian fleet had been spotted entering the planet's outer atmosphere. They had less than 3 hours now. All non-military personnel were to proceed to the emergency shelters immediately. Oliver stood up from his chair. He knew what he had to do. He could not save the colony. Nobody could do that. But maybe, just maybe, he could save the galaxy. His parents had given him a purpose. They had given him a weapon. And they had given him no choice but to use it. He removed the small vial from the message attachment. It was tiny, barely larger than his thumb, filled with a shimmering liquid that seemed to glow with its own light. Inside this vial was everything his parents had worked for. Inside this vial was hope. Oliver walked out of the communication center. Around him, people were running and shouting. Some were heading toward the shelters deep underground. Some were heading toward the military defense stations. Nobody was paying attention to a young man in a communication worker's uniform walking calmly toward the hangar. The hangar held several small spacecraft. Most of them were damaged or in storage. But Oliver knew there was one ship that might still work. It was an old escape pod, salvaged from a colony ship that had crashed decades ago. It had been sitting in the hangar for years, covered in dust and forgotten by everyone. Oliver climbed into the pod and began the startup sequence. The systems were old and reluctant to wake up, but they responded to his commands. Lights flickered on. Engines began to hum. The pod was alive again after so many years of sleep. As the hangar doors opened above him and the pod lifted off the ground, Oliver looked back one last time at the colony. He could see smoke rising from the upper settlements. The Xylothian ships were already beginning their attack. The colony was burning. But Oliver was not going to fight them. He was going to run toward them instead. He was going to fly directly into the heart of the Xylothian fleet. And he was going to change the fate of the entire galaxy. The small escape pod shot upward into the red sky, carrying one brave boy and one small vial that contained the power to transform the universe forever. The escape pod climbed higher and higher through Meridian 7's atmosphere. Oliver gripped the control stick tightly as the ship shook and rattled around him. Below, the colony was being torn apart by weapons fire from above. He could see bright explosions lighting up the dark sky, see buildings collapsing into rubble. Thousands of people were dying down there. Maybe tens of thousands. And he was running away from them. Oliver tried not to think about that. He tried not to think about the faces of people he knew, people who worked in the colony, people who had been kind to him. His parents were down there too, somewhere in those burning tunnels. He would never see them again. But they had told him what to do. They had told him to run. And they had told him to succeed. The pod broke through the upper atmosphere and suddenly the shaking stopped. Oliver was now in space above the dying world. Around him, the Xylothian fleet hung like a dark cloud. Massive warships, some of them as large as mountains, floated in orbit around the planet. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Their hulls seemed to be made of something alive, something that pulsed with an inner light. Smaller attack ships moved between the larger vessels like insects around a hive. Oliver's pod was tiny compared to these giants. It had no weapons, no shields, no special technology. It was just a small old rescue vehicle that had been sitting in storage for decades. On any normal day, the Xylothian sensors would have ignored it completely. But today was not a normal day. Suddenly, a voice filled the pod's interior. It was a woman's voice, but it sounded strange and distant, like it was coming from very far away through layers of time and space. The voice said, "Oliver Chin. I'm still here. I am still functional. Do you need my assistance?" Oliver jumped in his seat. He recognized the voice immediately. It belonged to an artificial intelligence named Arya. She had been his parents' research assistant for many years. Oliver had known her his entire life. She had been like a friend to him, teaching him things, answering his questions, sometimes even making jokes. But he had not heard her voice in over a year. He thought she had been destroyed in one of the colony attacks. "Arya?" Oliver said. "You are alive? How is this possible?" "My systems are fragmented," the AI responded. "Much of my consciousness was damaged when the research facility was attacked 6 months ago. But I maintained a backup copy of my core programming in the pod's emergency systems. I have been in low-power mode, waiting for someone to activate me. I have been waiting for you, Oliver." "My parents," Oliver said. "Did they know you were still here?" "Yes," Arya said. "They knew. They wanted to tell you, but they were afraid it would put you in danger if you knew too much. I am sorry they could not say goodbye." Oliver felt tears forming in his eyes, but he forced them back. He had to stay focused. He had a mission. Emotions could wait. Grief could wait. Right now, he needed to think about the vial in his pocket and the impossible journey ahead of him. "Arya, I need your help," Oliver said. "I need to reach the Xylothian flagship. The one called the Dreadnought Eternal. Can you help me navigate through their fleet without being detected?" There was a moment of silence. Then Arya spoke again. "That is a very dangerous request, Oliver. The Dreadnought Eternal is the most heavily protected ship in the entire Xylothian fleet. It is surrounded by thousands of defense systems. The probability of success is very small. But I understand why you need to go there. Your parents explained their theory to me before they died. They believe the Queen's consciousness is unstable. They believed that if the quantum link network could be disrupted, it might free the Xylothian population from hive mind control. Can it work?" Oliver asked. "I do not know," Arya said. "But I believe your parents were brilliant scientists and I believe in their work. If anyone can succeed, Oliver, it is you. I will help you." For the next several hours, Arya guided Oliver's small pod through the Xylothian fleet. She used her knowledge of their technology and scanning systems to find gaps and blind spots in their defenses. She showed Oliver routes through asteroid fields where sensors could not reach. She taught him how to hide his ship's heat signature by running the engines at minimal power. It was exhausting work. Oliver had to make split-second decisions, had to trust Arya's calculations completely. Several times, Xylothian patrol ships came dangerously close to detecting him. Once, a massive cargo vessel passed within 1,000 meters of his pod. Oliver held his breath the entire time, certain that he was about to be discovered and destroyed. But Arya's guidance was perfect. She anticipated the movements of enemy ships. She knew the patterns of their sensor scans. And slowly, impossibly, Oliver's small escape pod made its way deeper and deeper into the enemy fleet. As they got closer to the dreadnought Eternal, Oliver could see it clearly for the first time. It was the most enormous ship he had ever seen. It was shaped like a vast organic structure, with sections that looked like they were still alive, still breathing. The ship was so big that Oliver's mind had trouble comprehending its true size. It was like a floating city made of something that was neither metal nor flesh, but something that existed between the two. "We are getting close," Arya said. "I can now detect the ship's main communication frequencies. I can also detect something else, Oliver. I can feel the Queen's consciousness. It is vast and old and tired. I think she is aware of everything happening around her. I think she can sense us approaching. Be very careful now. What happens next will determine everything." Oliver took a deep breath. His hands were shaking. The vial in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 kilograms. He was about to change the course of history. He was about to fly directly into the heart of darkness itself. And there was no way to know if he would survive. But he had no choice. His parents had given him this responsibility. And Oliver was not the kind of person who would fail them. He adjusted his course and pointed the escape pod directly at the dreadnought Eternal. The massive ship grew larger and larger on his view screen. And Oliver Chen, just 17 years old, flew toward his destiny. Oliver's escape pod shook violently as it entered the dreadnought Eternal's atmosphere shield. Alarms sounded inside the small cockpit, warning him that the ship's defense systems were detecting his presence. But Arya had prepared for this moment. She had hacked into the dreadnought's communication networks just enough to make Oliver's pod appear as a routine maintenance vessel. It was a small trick, but it was enough to stop them from shooting him down immediately. The pod descended through layers of the enormous ship. Oliver could see through his view screen that the interior of the dreadnought was nothing like a normal spacecraft. It was organic. The walls seemed to be made of something that was alive, pulsing with bioluminescent light. Strange structures grew from the ceiling and floor like plants in an alien forest. The air itself seemed thick and heavy, filled with particles that made his view screen shimmer and blur. "I am detecting life signs everywhere," Arya said. "Millions of them. Most of them are dormant, but they are present. This entire ship is filled with Xylothian drones and suspended animation. If the Queen were to wake them all at once, this ship could field an army of incredible size." "How do I land without being caught?" Oliver asked. "There is a maintenance hangar on the lower levels," Arya replied. "It is designed for small repair vehicles. The system is automated and will not question your arrival if I send the correct codes. But Oliver, once you land, you will be inside the most dangerous place in the galaxy. You will be surrounded by billions of Xylothian creatures. If you are discovered, there is nothing I can do to help you." "I understand," Oliver said. He was terrified, but his voice was steady. His parents had trained him to be brave. They had told him that fear was just a feeling, and feelings could be controlled by the mind. Oliver controlled his fear now, pushing it deep down inside himself where it could not affect his actions. The escape pod landed in the maintenance hangar with a soft metallic sound. The landing gear touched down on what looked like a platform made of hardened organic material. Oliver waited for several minutes, but nothing happened. No alarms sounded. No enemy soldiers came running toward him. The hangar was silent except for the low humming sound that seemed to come from the ship's very walls. Oliver put on his emergency suit. It was designed to protect him from radiation and toxic atmospheres. It would not protect him from weapons, but it would help him survive the strange environment of the dreadnought. He secured the vial containing his parents' compound to his belt. Then he opened the pod's hatch and stepped out into the alien ship. The air inside the hangar was cold and humid. It smelled strange, like electricity and something organic, something that reminded Oliver of the smell of blood. The light came from the glowing walls themselves, casting everything in a sickly blue and green color. Oliver activated the tracking device on his wrist. Arya would guide him through the ship from here. "Proceed forward 50 meters, Arya instructed. "There is an entrance to the internal maintenance tunnels ahead of you. Those tunnels will allow you to move through the ship without being seen. Oliver walked carefully across the hangar floor. His footsteps echoed in the empty space. He tried to move quietly, even though he knew that sound would not matter much if the Xylothians detected him. But he had come too far to panic now. Every step brought him closer to his goal. Every step brought him closer to the Queen. The entrance to the maintenance tunnel was a large circular opening in the wall. Inside, the tunnel was barely large enough for Oliver to walk through without crouching. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch, and they pulsed with a rhythm that reminded Oliver of a heartbeat. It felt like he was walking through the inside of a living creature because in many ways he was. The entire dreadnought was a living ship, a fusion of technology and biology. As Oliver moved through the tunnels, Arya guided him with precise directions. Left, right, down this passage, up that ladder. The tunnels seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning through the body of the enormous vessel. Oliver walked for what felt like hours, though according to his wrist chrono, only 30 minutes had passed. Several times he heard sounds that made him freeze in place. Once he heard what sounded like thousands of voices speaking in unison, a terrible chorus of consciousness that made his teeth ache and his skin crawl. Another time he heard something large moving through a parallel tunnel, something so massive that the walls shook. Oliver pressed himself against the tunnel wall and held his breath, terrified that whatever it was would sense his presence. But nothing found him. And gradually, Oliver realized that he was getting closer. The air was becoming warmer. The walls were glowing brighter. And there was a sound, a deep thrumming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You are approaching the Queen's chamber," Arya said quietly. "Oliver, I must tell you something. I am detecting something very strange. The Queen's consciousness is not as strong as the records suggest. It is fragmented. It is worn. Your parents were right. She has been maintaining her connection to billions of minds for so long that her own consciousness has begun to fracture. She is tired, Oliver. She is so very tired." Oliver emerged from the maintenance tunnel into a vast chamber. It was the largest room he had ever seen. The walls curved upward so far that Oliver could not see the ceiling. They seemed to stretch into infinity. And hanging in the center of this impossible space, suspended in a chamber of crystalline material filled with glowing liquid, was the Queen. She was enormous. Her body was a fusion of many different forms, part creature, part machine, part something that had no name in any human language. Thousands of crystalline structures protruded from her body, each one glowing with a different color, each one connected to countless threads of energy that spread out in all directions. She was beautiful and terrible. She was ancient and powerful. And she was sleeping. Oliver could feel her consciousness even though she was asleep. It was like standing next to an ocean, feeling the presence of something vastly larger than himself. This being controlled an entire civilization. This being had conquered most of the galaxy. And Oliver was about to challenge her with nothing but a vial of liquid and his parents' hopes. He took a step forward. The Queen's eyes opened. The Queen's eyes were vast and infinite. They held within them the consciousness of billions of creatures. Oliver felt like he was staring into the depths of space itself, into a darkness that contained stars and the spaces between stars. For a moment he could not move. He could not think. He could only stand there and feel the weight of that ancient gaze upon him. Then the Queen spoke. Her voice did not come through the air. Instead, it appeared directly inside Oliver's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. It was a voice made of pure thought, and it filled every corner of his consciousness. "A human has entered my domain," the voice said. "A small, fragile human child. How curious. In all my thousands of years of existence, I have never allowed a human to come this close to me. They are so weak, so temporary, so easily destroyed. Why would I permit this?" Oliver forced himself to take a breath. His legs felt like they were made of water, but he made them hold his weight. He had prepared for this moment his entire life, even though he had not known it. His parents had trained him to think clearly under pressure. They had taught him to see the truth beneath the surface of things. And right now, the truth was that the Queen was waiting to hear what he had to say. "Because," Oliver said, his voice steady despite his fear, "you are curious. You are alone and loneliness makes you curious." For a moment, there was silence in the chamber. Then the Queen's crystalline structures pulsed with light, and Oliver felt something like surprise emanate from her consciousness. She had not expected him to speak so directly. She had expected fear. She had expected begging or screaming or attempts at violence. But Oliver had offered neither. "You are correct," the Queen said. "I am curious, but I am also powerful. I am also capable of destroying you before you can take another breath. Why should I listen to anything you have to say?" Oliver reached slowly into his suit and withdrew the vial. The liquid inside glowed softly, reflecting the light from the Queen's crystalline structures. He held it up so that she could see it clearly. "My parents were scientists," Oliver said. "They studied your kind for many years. They learned things about your biology, about your consciousness, about how your mind connects to the minds of all your people. They discovered something that I think you already know, even though you have never admitted it to yourself." "And what is that?" the Queen asked. "You are tired," Oliver said. "You have been controlling billions of minds for thousands of years. Every thought from every Xylothian, every emotion, every memory, every moment of their existence flows through your consciousness. It is a burden so enormous that it is slowly destroying you. Your mind is fracturing. Your connections are weakening. You are not as strong as you were even 100 years ago." The Queen did not respond for a long time. The glowing structures on her body pulsed more slowly. Oliver could feel her emotions now, and they were complex and deep. He felt sadness. He felt exhaustion. He felt a desperate longing for something he could not name. "What is in that vial?" the Queen finally asked. "A compound," Oliver said. "It is designed to disrupt the quantum crystals that link you to your people. If I introduce it into your life support system, the connection will be broken. All the minds that you have controlled will suddenly become individuals again. They will think for themselves. They will feel for themselves. They will have free will. They will also be lost," the Queen said. "They will not know how to function without my guidance. Chaos will consume my civilization." "Perhaps," Oliver agreed. "Or perhaps they will learn to build something new. Something better. Something that is not based on control and domination, but on choice and cooperation. You have the power to find out. But you have to be willing to let them go." "Why would you offer me this?" the Queen asked. "Humans and Xylothians are enemies. Your kind has fought mine for centuries. You should want me to suffer. You should want my civilization to fall." Oliver thought about his parents. He thought about all the people on Meridian 7 who were dying right now because of the Xylothian invasion. He thought about the billions of humans who had been killed throughout history by the Xylothian Empire. He had every reason to hate this creature before him. Every reason to want revenge. But he also understood something that most people never learned. He understood that hate only created more hate. That violence only created more violence. That the only way to truly win was to offer something that the enemy did not expect. Compassion. Understanding. A chance at redemption. "Because," Oliver said, "my parents believed that even your kind deserves a second chance. They believed that consciousness, no matter what form it takes, deserves the freedom to choose its own path. And I believe what they believed." The Queen's crystalline structures suddenly blazed with brilliant light. For a moment, Oliver thought he had made a terrible mistake. He thought she was going to kill him. But then he realized what was happening. The Queen was crying. She was experiencing emotions so powerful that her entire body was radiating them outward in waves of energy. "I am afraid," the Queen said. Her voice was quieter now, more vulnerable. "I have been afraid for so long that I cannot remember what it feels like to be anything else. For thousands of years, I have held my civilization together through force of will and consciousness. If I let go, who will I be? What will I become?" "You will become yourself," Oliver said. "For the first time in your existence, you will have the chance to discover who you truly are, without the burden of controlling billions of minds. You will be free." Oliver walked forward slowly. The Queen did not stop him. He reached the control panel beside her crystalline chamber. With shaking hands, he inserted the vial into the injection port. "Are you certain?" the Queen asked. "Once you do this, there is no going back." "I am certain," Oliver said. And he pressed the button. The compound flowed into the Queen's life support system. Her crystalline structures suddenly pulsed with a new kind of light, a light that spread out in all directions, radiating from her body like waves of energy. The Queen screamed, but it was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of release. It was a scream of liberation. And across the entire galaxy, billions of Xylothian minds suddenly awoke to consciousness. For the first time in their history, they were free. The energy from the quantum link disruption spread through space like a wave of pure light. On Meridian 7, the Xylothian attack ships suddenly stopped firing. Their pilots, freed from the hive mind control, were confused and terrified. They did not know what to do or where to go. Some of them crashed into the planet's surface. Others simply drifted, their crews standing paralyzed by the sudden reality of individual consciousness. Inside the Dreadnought Eternal, the transformation was even more dramatic. The ship's systems began to shut down as billions of Xylothian drones woke up at the same time. The massive vessel that had been ruled by a single consciousness was suddenly filled with countless individual minds, each one confused, each one asking questions, each one struggling to understand what had happened to them. Oliver was thrown to the ground by the force of the energy discharge. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the crystalline chamber containing the Queen had shattered. The glowing liquid was pouring out onto the chamber floor. And the Queen herself was floating in the air, her body transformed. She was smaller now, more compact. The crystalline structures that had covered her form had fallen away. She looked almost peaceful. "It is done," the Queen said. Her voice was different now. It was still powerful, but it was no longer filled with the weight of billions of consciousnesses. It was just her own voice, unique and individual for the first time in thousands of years. "I can no longer feel them. I can no longer control them. I am alone." "You are free," Oliver said, rising to his feet. "That is what freedom feels like." Arya's voice suddenly filled the chamber through Oliver's wrist communicator. She sounded distressed. "Oliver, I am detecting massive system failures throughout the ship. The Dreadnought's life support is failing. The entire vessel is destabilizing. You need to leave immediately. You have less than 10 minutes before this ship tears itself apart." Oliver looked at the Queen. She was still floating in the air, and her eyes were looking at something far away, something that only she could see. She was experiencing individual consciousness for the first time in thousands of years, and the weight of that realization was pressing down on her. "Come with me," Oliver said. "We can escape together." The Queen turned her gaze toward him. For a moment she did not respond. Then she said, "No. I must stay here. I must face what I have done. For thousands of years, I have ruled through control and fear. I have conquered worlds. I have ended civilizations. I have caused suffering beyond measure. It is time for me to face the consequences of those actions." "That is not necessary," Oliver protested. "You can come with me. You can help your people learn to live as individuals. You can guide them through this transition." "That is exactly why I must stay," the Queen said. "My people do not need a ruler anymore. They need to learn to think for themselves, to make their own choices, to build their own societies. If I survive and guide them, I will simply recreate the old system under a different name. I will still be controlling them. I will still be limiting their freedom. No. I choose to end this ship with honor." The chamber was shaking now. Cracks were appearing in the walls. The bioluminescent light was flickering and fading. Oliver could hear terrible sounds like the ship itself was screaming. "Oliver," the Queen said, "you have given my people a gift beyond measure. You have given them the chance to become more than they were. Tell them that I am proud of them. Tell them that I believe they will build something beautiful with their freedom." "I will," Oliver said. Tears were streaming down his face now. He did not fully understand why he was crying. He was crying for the Queen. He was crying for his parents. He was crying for all the suffering that had taken place, and all the suffering that might still come in the future. But he was also crying with hope. Because something had changed. The galaxy had changed. And there was a chance now for a better future. Oliver ran from the chamber. Behind him, the Dreadnought Eternal was collapsing. He raced through the maintenance tunnels, following Arya's guidance. The escape pod was still where he had left it, waiting for him in the hangar. Oliver threw himself inside and began the startup sequence. The engines roared to life. The pod lifted off the ground just as the hangar itself began to cave in. He shot out of the Dreadnought seconds before the entire structure collapsed. Behind him, the massive ship broke apart, exploding into fragments of organic metal and crystalline structures. The Queen was gone. But her sacrifice had meaning. Her death had purpose. Over the next few months, the galaxy transformed. The Xylothian civilization, no longer controlled by a single consciousness, broke apart into thousands of independent star systems and colonies. Some of them descended into chaos. Some of them fell into new forms of tyranny. But many of them, for the first time in their history, chose peace. They chose cooperation. They chose to build societies based on freedom and individual choice. Humanity, facing an enemy that was no longer unified and unstoppable, was able to negotiate truces and peace treaties. The war that had raged for 300 years came to an end. Not through victory but through transformation. Oliver became a bridge between humanity and the Xylothian people. At 18 years old, he was recognized across the galaxy as the boy who had changed everything. Some called him a hero. Others called him a traitor to humanity. But Oliver did not care about what people called him. He cared about the future. He cared about building something new. 2 years after the collapse of the Dreadnought Eternal, Oliver stood on a newly terraformed colony world. Around him, humans and Xylothians worked together, building structures that were part human architecture and part Xylothian design. They had created something that neither species could have created alone. They had created hope. A Xylothian named Kess approached Oliver. Kess had been one of the first drones to gain individual consciousness. She had chosen to become an artist, painting images of beauty and freedom that had never existed before the Queen's fall. "I wanted to thank you," Kess said in the strange musical way that Xylothians spoke. "I wanted to tell you that my people are grateful. We are building lives that have meaning. Lives that we have chosen for ourselves. We would never have had this without your courage." Oliver smiled. "Your queen was the one with true courage," he said. "She was the one who let go of everything she had built. That is the greatest kind of bravery." That night, Oliver looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, new civilizations were being born. Xylothians were learning to farm, to create art, to fall in love, to dream. Humans and Xylothians were learning to live together, to understand each other, to build a future that had seemed impossible just a few years before. And Oliver Chin, the boy from Meridian 7, knew that his parents would be proud. They had given him the knowledge. They had given him the courage. And he had changed the fate of the galaxy.